Welcome to Plow and Potato. I'm Sean Bonet.
I'm Joffre Swait.
You drink. Actually, I was thinking I didn't bring my water, so I might just sip off Kimberly's. Which brings me to the fact that we have our first ever guest today.
It's my wife.
I'm introducing me.
Yeah.
Mrs. Kimberly Swait. She is a mother and a visual art teacher. We want to give a big thank you to our corporate sponsors, Kepler Education.
They're so corporate.
They're so corporate.
So corporate, so sponsored.
all in one compound sentence. They are a consortium of classical, independent Christian teachers. They team up with families and train kids in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. So find them at kepler.education if you are in need of good teaching.
We've all taught at Kepler at one point or another.
We are Kepler certified. Bing. Is this a check for you guys? So our topic today is how to make beauty. And we have all of the questions under that topic that we'll address, such as what is beauty? What is art? How do we make good art? And how should Christians participate in art? Before we jump into that main course, Joffre has an appetizer for us.
Delightful. Well, a poem that is particularly...
You know, that we should actually have a point where we have literal appetizers. I'm good with this metaphysical appetizer.
That would be very nice.
I'm thinking of water and I want some squid.
Actually, and the fact that you interrupted is a perfect kind of way to introduce to the audience. We had been having a conversation off mic about how I talk over you too much, and that next time I did it, you should probably just call me out. But I like the tactic you're adopting instead, which is just interrupting
just reverse it, yeah. Now I'm going to talk over you.
Perfect. You know, that's fair, my dude. So this poem is by Louis MacNeish. It's called Bagpipe Music. And let's just revel in these times that we're living right now. These uncertain times. These times in which the church is failing to be the church. This is a very Irish poem. Well, he's from Northern Ireland. So I want to tell you a couple of things. First, I want to remind you that fags are cigarettes.
What?
It's
a fag's a cigarette, my dude. And that going upon the parish is the expression used to refer to going on welfare. Going upon the parish because the church used to look after people. You remember that? No. Not even your great-grandparents remember that.
I'm Irish.
But the church used to look after people. The American church looked after
Irish?
people.
You don't look Irish.
So I'm going to read my
You
poem.
look Mexican.
Yeah, she does. So in Miami, she's from South Florida. People in Miami walk up to her and start speaking in Spanish to her. She's all Irish and English. My sweet, sweet wife.
Oh.
But let me read bagpipe music to you. It's no-go the merry-go-round, it's no-go the rickshaw. All we want is a limousine and a ticket for the peep show. Their knickers are made of crêpe de chine, their shoes are made of python, their halls are lined with tiger rugs, and their walls with heads of bison. John MacDonald found a corpse, put it under the sofa, waited till it came to life and hit it with a polka. Sold its eyes for souvenirs, sold its blood for whiskey, kept its bones for dumbbells to use when he was 50. Real people say dumbbell, not dumbbells. Oops. It's no-go the Yogi Man, it's no-go Blavatsky. All we want is a bank balance and a bit of skirt in a taxi. Annie McDougall went to milk, caught her foot in the heather, woke to hear a dance record playing of old Vienna. It's no-go your maidenheads, it's no-go your culture. All we want is a Dunlop tire and the devil mend the puncture. The Laird of Phelps spent Hogmanay declaring he was sober, counted his feet to prove the fact and found he had 1 foot over. Mrs. Carmichael had her 5th, looked at the job with repulsion, said to the midwife, "Take it away, I'm through with overproduction." It's no-go the gossip column, it's no-go the Chailey. All we want is a mother's help and a sugar stick for the baby. Willie Murray cut his thumb, couldn't count the damage, took the hide of an Ayrshire cow and used it for a bandage. His brother caught 300 cran when the seas were lavish, threw the bleeders back in the sea and went upon the parish. It's no-go the herring board, it's no-go the Bible. All we want is a packet of fags when our hands are idle. It's no-go the picture palace, it's no-go the stadium, it's no-go the country cot with a pot of pink geraniums. It's no-go the government grants, it's no-go the elections. Sit on your ass for 50 years and hang your hat on a pension. It's no-go, my honey love, it's no-go, my poppet. Work your hands from day to day, the winds will blow the profit. The glass is falling hour by hour, the glass will fall forever. But if you break the bloody glass, you won't hold up the weather. Yeah, that's appropriate.
I need to confess, I have read very little poetry, and I have listened to very little poetry. So hearing all of that, that was actually enjoyable. But at the beginning, I was like, "What
is happening?
What is happening?" And then I sort of got it. What am I supposed to think after you get done reading a poem?
I love that just humble approach. I haven't read much poetry. What am I supposed to think?
Well, and I feel like this is appropriate because you know, if I played some sort of symphony or concerto, you might be like,
"Yep, what's happening now?" I would definitely be like that.
But I did hear moments of the spoken art happening there, and I was like, "Oh, that's beautiful." But what am I supposed?
What's conceptually?
How am I supposed to receive that?
Yeah, you're supposed to receive that with chagrin and a spirit of repentance. Because you and I...
It's just like everything's going bad.
He's speaking poetry to me, isn't he? Is he doing this to you all the time?
Yes.
Just like...
And sometimes she hates it. Sometimes she loves it.
Do you really?
I like it when I get it right, you know?
When you understand what he's saying.
Well, yeah, when you get the poem. Because so much of it is simply... It's like poetry feels like you're getting glimpses of something.
Yeah.
And hopefully you're making a not totally focused picture, but you get it.
And this poem definitely flashes from image to image to image, but all the images are gray and sad and going down, even though there's this lively tune to the poem.
Yes.
Right? There's a lively tune, and this woman is like, I don't want any more babies. The government needs to look after me.
Yeah, that was wicked.
And that's this poem is about the church giving up its responsibilities, people not wanting to work because the government will look after them, and now life is meaningless. And that has a political impact. It's no-go the elections. Nothing matters.
Is that what the no-go thing is like?
Yeah. Okay. Everything's just off. We're done here. We're done working. We're done voting. We're done going to church. We're not building and making. Exactly. And at the root of that, I think, and it's hinted at in the poem, at the root of that is the fact that the church has abdicated. The church isn't here anymore to do what it do.
Yeah.
And so now everything is gray and drab and sad, and what's happening out there is happening because Ichabod, because the church has just abdicated.
It even felt dirty. Like there's...
Yeah. Well, I did say ass, but yes.
Yeah, I'm with you, Kimberly. It had
Yeah.
the dirty of like kind of film noir, early type of cinematography where you're just seeing all these damp shots and everyone's really sad.
Yeah.
And
there's a scene in the poem, and in which the brother goes out to the sea, to the ocean, to fish. He catches cran, which we may not recognize as a fish, but he catches 300 cran.
I heard crayons.
And then throws them back in. And instead he goes on welfare.
Yes.
And it's more than just the government doing that to us or us allowing us to be enslaved by the government that way, but because of our riches and our sloth, there's so much in our life that is like that, right? And so we actually make beautiful, productive things like babies and catching fish, and then we're like, chuck, yoink.
Yeah, interesting. When someone listens to poetry, the poet isn't saying everything matter-of-factly. They're trying to be artistic with their language. What is generally the approach that a poet has when writing?
Well, it depends on the poet. I mean, a lot of poets are purposely destructive, and I think we're going to talk a lot about that when we're all talking about art from our particular angles and the work that we do. But a poet who's actually building something is concerned with making the language striking and with conveying a message, but almost never narratively. Right? And so this poem in particular is very impressionistic, quick hops and these flashes. And and there's a reason that art historians can attach during certain time periods. The music was like this, the art was like this, the literature was like this, and see how they all could go under the same name or the same umbrella, because people are often trying to do the same things at the same time, but one person is painting and the other person is writing. So impressionistic, I think, I use that term, even though this poem was written much later than that, because it gives you these quick impressions and flashes, but you could call it other things. But the poet wants to manipulate the words to create a certain, not just intellectual, but emotional response in you.
That's fantastic. Well, now we're going to take a shot in the sky, start getting a wide angle vision of our main topic today, which is how to make beauty. What is beauty, and what are the arts? What are the artists trying to do in their craft, which we just sort of peppered right there from the actual composition itself, the poem, and then just a little processing of what happened in that poem, and then what a poet is trying to do on a large scale. So I'll start this conversation by posing the question, what is beauty? It's kind of the age-old question, the one that makes all of the freshmen and sophomores wiggle in their seats, all of the watered-down Christians glaze over their eyes. They kind of taken the beauty is in the eye of the beholder approach. So as I was meditating on this, I crafted this definition.
Oh, it's crafted.
Yes.
I composed it.
Like a poet.
It's full of harmony and melody. So, beauty is a lens, vehicle, or metaphor for truth and reality that transforms us into the greater likeness of Christ. It is that which conforms us to the perfect. I'm curious to get your take on that. Would you like me to read it again?
I'm fine. Because I'm set to object.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right.
So that's the kickoff.
Yeah, exactly. So everything that you said about beauty and describing it, I think I would agree with. But there's a reason we have this trilogion of truth, beauty, and goodness.
Trilogion.
You like that?
Sounds like a beer.
Yeah.
And what I would drink. But I think that we don't want to. The issue I take, I guess, in sum, with that definition is that beauty is a vehicle and is limited to being a vehicle. Now, of course, beauty does take us to God. Truth takes us to God. Goodness takes us to God. But then there's the conversation around how much is beauty a thing in itself.
I'm so glad you said that because when I was trying to describe the beauty of music, one of the principles that I observed is that music is not independent. Beauty is not independent. It's completely dependent on the eternal God and his creation, because without the creation, the beauty would not exist and it would be meaningless.
Yeah.
Because the gift is meant to sort of reflect the created order and the eternal being.
And that is true also, though, of truth, for example, right? Truth is personal. It comes from God. It's meaningless without God, and the same of beauty can be said.
Kimberly, what is beauty?
Well, I've been thinking while you guys are talking, and a couple of things came to mind.
We don't think when we talk.
Yeah, I noticed that. So I was thinking. So I had a lot of thoughts, so I'm trying to put them in a coherent way.
Beautiful.
But I was even thinking about, when I was in college, I did this piece, and it was, my teachers loved it, okay? So I was in a secular college. I did a piece that was purposely kind of ugly, and it was of a weed, and it was supposed to be a portrait of Christ, because in Isaiah it talks about how he was not someone to really look upon. He was not interesting in any way. I purposely did a picture that I thought no one would pay much attention to, and that was actually visually boring, of a stump with a weed growing out of it, And so it was to speak on the fact that Christ was not beautiful in physical appearance. So I was thinking about when you're saying like a vehicle of something that goes to Christ. I don't know that beauty is always, it does point to Christ, and I think it was smart to bring up the creation in there, because even, I was thinking also of this painting I saw yesterday of a brown paper bag, and the brown paper bag is super boring, right? Like, who wants a painting of a brown paper bag? This painting was beautiful, and the reason it was because light was hitting it in a way, and they had painted it well and shown it with color in such a way that I was like, that to me is a really cool artist, when they take something as boring as a brown paper bag and make it beautiful simply by showing God's light on it.
Well, and the way you describe that actually kind of makes me think of another thing that's important when we think about beauty, which is, we would never say as Christians that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but there is a sense in which we as Christians need to train ourselves to see beauty.
Yep.
Right? And so a painting of a brown paper bag, there's a sense in which the skill of the artist can force you to look at it and say that it's beautiful. But we also have to be prepared. We have to have our eyes open and be able to let, the Holy Spirit can inspire us to think that a painting of a brown paper bag is beautiful.
Yes.
And not out of nowhere, because it's beautiful. But there's some training that's necessary not only for the artist, but for the beholder.
All of this reveals the frustration I think many have when discussing beauty is you can't say enough in just one sentence about beauty. And so I have more to my definition. It's more ideas, really. And I was like, I put in a separate bullet point because...
So your approach to this was like, you know what? I'm going to just throw something down real quick.
Keep giving us
and then let's see what happens. Yeah. I like it.
I think you guys are going to like this. I liked it. And I liked it because it helps me sort things out. So there are many beauties, but some beauties are greater than other. A thing's beauty is heightened by the appropriate situation too. So beauty aligns itself with God's truth, and beauty nourishes the metaphysical needs of its creator and audience. Something is outstandingly beautiful when the content, form, context, and service reaches its maximum peak. So you have the objective form that is beautiful, the good line, the good color, the good harmony, the good cadence of the word. But then you have the situation in which the piece of art is delivered. That context must be so fitting that it's beautiful.
Yes, so a great example of that in art is like something like David Serrano's Piss Christ. And it's a terrible piece.
You say pissed Christ?
Yes.
It's like P-I-S-S-E-D,
yes.
like pissed, like I'm angry.
So Joffre has said ass, and Kimberly has now said piss.
And I spelled it.
So it's a crucifix. And
it's so gorgeous.
And when you look at it, it's a photograph of a crucifix, and it's got this beautiful golden color all over it. So if you looked at it without knowing anything else, you would think it's beautiful. But when you find out,
demonic.
He peed in a cup and put the crucifix upside down, and then took a photograph.
Probably
of it.
After eating a lot of vitamin B rich foods.
So.
It's golden.
I knew I shouldn't have brought it up because of the inappropriate.
Well, that actually really touches on what.
So it really hits where it's a beautiful object with a disgusting thought and intention.
With someone trying to face it.
Yes, or they're trying to mess with your head.
They're saying something about religion and Jesus, right? Like you think this is beautiful and golden, but I pissed on it.
Yeah.
Right. Which actually, one of the most interesting things about art is to think about who the artists are. And there are a lot of people in the art world, artists, who want to say that they want to abstract art from its makers and say that either this thing is beautiful or not. Judge it simply as itself. But then you find out that the painter is a horribly depraved person who has a harem in Morocco or has had 17 divorces, and that shouldn't affect how you look at that piece of art. And it absolutely should. Beauty comes from God, and He has made you a sub-creator. You go and make something beautiful, but you have a very ugly life. No, that's not true beauty. You're lying. You're Satan coming as an angel of light. And Serrano's Piss Christ is a demon disguised as an angel of light, and he's trying to trick you. Like it's funny, right? Yeah. Like look at that. See that it's beautiful, and then read what it's called. Ha ha, gotcha.
That's interesting. So, but I think there's different layers of beauty, because if we took that standard, then so much of the arts that we love and hold, we'd have to reject because of the people behind it.
I'm just saying that it's valid to let the story of who the artist is affect how you enjoy the art.
Yeah, well, I think that's a part of the art.
Yes.
But it's one piece in the overall mosaic.
Right. That's like Monet, who everyone thinks his pieces are absolutely beautiful, completely rejected God and hated God.
Yeah.
And yet he was displaying God's light on things. That's what he was painting.
Although
so
in a way that was a little cracked. You know, you can see his sin in his work.
He was rebelling against the art world, and he was also rebelling against God. But it's like, it's still interesting to me that it still created something beautiful simply because he was painting God's light.
And something Christians
God's
could
light
redeem.
is beautiful. I mean, you can't deny God's light's beauty on creation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's definitely some...
Well, you bring up a good point. So, as Joffre said, the trilogian.
I don't even know if that's good Greek, by the way. I just pushed it out there.
Trilogian. I like this. I just want to keep saying trilogian. Or it could be a good city or a type of wood.
I think it would be a good science fiction novel.
Can I have a trilogian table, please, with mahogany chairs?
Ooh.
Yes, you may.
Trilogian.
So, well, I said beauty wasn't dependent early on, and I was talking about like it needs creation, it needs God, but it's also in harmony with goodness and truth. And so one way we can assess beauty is what's the goodness and truth present. What's fascinating is beauty does have a level of subjectivity to it. It's not completely subjective, so we wouldn't affirm the sentiment that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But the beholder still has something to say, and their opinion is important. So when you take someone like Monet, and even just if we compare composers and poets, contemporaries with him, we see certain compositional or techniques of their craft that they're doing that in some ways rebel or expand or go against the common convention. And we look back, removed from the context, and observe their art and say, that's beautiful. Yeah. And you have this continuum throughout. Like, one fascinating example is John Calvin was pretty skeptical of some of Johann Sebastian Bach's work because of its ornamentedness and its decorum. Specifically in the context of a worship service, right? But even beyond that, there was still some objections. And for the Christian, especially like the classical Christian, they'll point to Bach first and say he is the peak of musical beauty and truth. And then you have a very strong theologian sort of taking issue with his beauty because Bach was pushing the envelope of his day. So my question is, how do we as Christians process new trends? And how do we process trends from the past that were new but now are history?
I was thinking a lot about that this week as I was teaching my students, that we still need to remember that God is in control of art history and music history. And I was thinking about it a lot because things like the invention of the camera dramatically changed art because it was no longer necessary for an artist to paint a portrait or to you could use a camera, and now it's so much easier to create images. It's ridiculous. And so I was, a lot of people reject so much of what's happening, and for good reason, but there's also something cool about the way things are moving. Even, it got to the point where people rejected practically any visual representation, and it became only about the ideas of what you were creating. I don't think that's how we should continue thinking in terms of art, but there's something we can learn from that. Like, now I've seen some amazing artwork that's beautiful and incredibly thoughtful and clever. It's communicating things to people, and it's beautiful. So it's very fun and interesting to look at. And even things like, I saw some guy recently, some artist, put a giant rubber duck in a harbor. Like, giant. I mean, this is bigger than like a boat. And
it was a real rubber duck, or he painted it?
He created a rubber duck. Okay.
Not real. He created an art land.
It's a real.
He put a huge rubber duck out on the water.
He manufactured it.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay. And I looked at it and I was delighted by it. I was like, that's so fun and whimsical.
Whimsy on a massive scale.
Yeah, and it made me smile, and I thought it's kind of fun to think, and I don't know that I would say like we should be paying for rubber ducks to be created in harbors, but I'm just saying, there's something to just bringing joy through your work.
And something to playing.
Yes,
I mean, just play and have fun.
And it could be even better if it had maybe some more practical purpose, even, you know, where like, I don't know, kids could take rides on it or something. You know what I mean?
Sweet. I'm
just saying that I think that it's good to consider that art has gone in this direction for a reason, and we should. It's okay to be somewhat open-minded about it, because a lot of people still keep talking like we should only paint like in the Renaissance, and it's like that's foolish thinking, you know. And there's a lot to be gained. Even in art, one of my favorite things right now is how much people are creative with materials. These things that I saw this entire sculpture made of wire that was just gorgeous and really neatly made. So anyway, I just think there's some really neat things happening that we should be taking that and using it to glorify God's work, God's creation. Some of it does glorify God, so we should appreciate that part of it.
And in thinking about trends, and particularly what you said about having an open mind, which is such a it's a difficult phrase, because immediately you want to throw out the witticisms that great writers have used with that phrase. But I would say two things about truth and beauty, and go back to the example you gave with Bach and Calvin, and thinking about Calvin's reaction, and I would say overreaction to the curlicues and funness of Bach's work.
That's a really good way to describe it.
So the first thing is that there is truth and there is beauty, but it's tempting for us to think of truth as some sort of monad, some sort of point, and to do the same to beauty, and that's not the case. We serve a God who is one and three. It is not relativist of me to say that there's a lot of truth, right? Everything comes from God, and there are not many truths, but there are a lot of truths. There are a lot of ways to be true, and there are a lot of ways to be beautiful and still be holy and still glorify God. So there's that, first of all, that we automatically tend to just narrow everything. There's the truth, and there's the beauty. That's not
and
the
there's
case.
The way and the life. No.
Okay. But that's when we think that way. If we see some new trend, then we're going to write it off for being new, because it's not the truth. It's not the beauty, the good. And the other thing I would say about truth and beauty is that whenever Christians see something new and purportedly beautiful, they want to run it through the filter of truth.
Okay.
Which is fine. No one ever looks at something that is purportedly true and runs it through the filter of beauty. We need more aesthetic training. Christians need to know what is beautiful, know how to make what is beautiful, know how to engage with what is beautiful, so that when someone comes out and says, here's a thing I say is true, they can look at it from every angle, including what is beautiful. If you recognize that something is ugly, then you already know that if you dig enough, you'll find a lie in it. And that's valid thinking. Christians should think that way. Oh, that's ugly. Okay, so now I know there's something wicked in there. I can go dig it out. I can make a truthful proposition to show that it's ugly, that it's wicked. But with the ugliness is what told me right away. I recognize ugliness. I'm trained in this, and now I know it's wicked.
And you're speaking about ugliness more than just a verbal truth, right? Like if you hear a piece of music, and you think, "Oh, that's ugly."
Yeah.
But
so cacophony is evil.
But the qualification, I think, is that you're trained in aesthetics, because our palates can be immature,
right?
And they're primarily immature because they're not fully exposed or informed.
But here's so here's, I guess, what I'm calling for, which is for Christians to make a priority out of aesthetic training. We do in our circles make a priority of training in truth. Let's read enough theology books so that when we've got our Bibles open, and then we can tackle anything that comes at us with that. Well, it'll actually be easier to deceive you sometimes if that's all you do and you never train aesthetically. And we should also even learn to respect someone who is well trained aesthetically coming to us with an objection.
Yeah, even, a lot of artists are making things that are ugly, but they seem to have this good message, right? There's so much filth out there, and that should just completely be rejected in art. But then there's stuff like, there's this piece by Mike Kelly where he has all this soiled clothing, soiled like teddy bears and all these stuffed animals and things in a huge pile in the museum. And it's about the abuse of children. But it's a filthy, ugly piece because it's trying to talk about something that's filthy and ugly.
Yep.
But it brings absolutely no hope. It brings no beauty. It brings no, no solution. There's nothing.
So it has no worth.
Yeah, like, so it loses. It's like, we could, some people might go in and be like, but it's talking about something awful and showing how awful it is. And it's like,
he has good reasons for doing this,
right,
good motivations.
But he's not bringing anything to it that would help or be a joy or be.
And way
good
on the
for
other
it.
side of that is something like a Thomas Kincaid, right?
Right.
Or the musical or written equivalents of that, where everything is
talking
pink
about
and
Thomas
purple. And the snowfall is perfect, and there's a little fire, and it's
There's
some
no
sort
indoor plumbing, and your
Well,
wife
don't
is
think about it too deeply. Right? It's cotton.
It's ideal.
It's visual
Yeah.
cotton candy.
Yep.
Right. And so we're some people who are poorly trained aesthetically.
enjoy that stuff. How could they?
You're thinking about someone
Think
related
about
to you right
pop
now,
music.
aren't you?
Pop music would be how you would relate
But you know,
to that.
there are moral aspects to this, and I think that's why it's important that all of us are in our little families. Everyone's gathered around their TVs and their MP3 players. Those still exist.
Their Walkmans,
Yes,
their
exactly.
CD players.
Right now, they're gathered around the fireplace, listening to us and wondering, so what does this mean for me? What do they mean by aesthetic training? What's happening right now? Mm-hmm. So let's ask our resident artist. You're also a resident artist. Let's ask this one, the guest, the exciting one. What would you say to that family gathered around the fireplace right now? Hi, kids.
Take my Kepler art class.
Oh, wow.
Kepler education.
Straight up plug.
No, let's see. So, I would say that actually I feel like it's been lost enough that it's actually hard to find Christian art education. And it's hard to find it without, and especially just so many people are afraid to say that so much of the art world is a mess and not worth looking at. So I would say to find, it's even hard to look through art history books. There are some good art history books that have some information, like things like Usborne and stuff like that are pretty good for teaching kids about artwork and teaching kids about aesthetics on a basic level.
Yeah.
Trying to think of what else. There's some great authors out there that have written about it.
Nancy Pearcey is great. And then Rookmaker's book, Modern Art and the Death of a Culture, is very good. Even learning to think critically. You don't have to read something that's necessarily positive. There is a paucity of material out there for Christians. Yeah. And Christians have largely written off the art world. Yeah. In every facet. How many Christian composers do you know? How many Christian poets do you know? They're out there. I mean, Joya was, is recently been a well-known Christian poet, but Christians aren't reading him, right? And so we've just largely written all that off, which means that there's a lack of materials for us to improve ourselves. Yeah. What there is some well-made critical material, and that could be like the bridge to take us to some positive stuff as well.
Yeah. So we've discussed what is beauty, and now we're trying to get into the practical. How does beauty come out in visual arts, in poetry and music? And Kimberly, in her first sentence, said it. You need to get a teacher. You need to become a student of the discipline in order to make conclusions and say something intelligible. Like, at this point, we can sort of just vaguely describe, well, you should get this book or kind of go under this study. But like you need to learn the history and the tools involved, the materials. So as a musician and a music teacher, I would train Christian music scholars first in a theological foundation. So we'd establish Christian doctrine and realize there is coherence to the world, and we have to be looking to Christ and everything to make sense of all that we do. But then we sort of have to take a back seat to listen and to learn and take in, because it's so much easier in theology sometimes to say, oh, this is not true. I can see the ugliness in this theologically, so to speak. It's a little bit different with the arts because there's so many perspectives and just work to consume.
Yeah, actually, art is very dangerous because it can turn into idolatry so easily too,
Yes.
right? So, I mean, I've always struggled with what is okay to paint, and things like that, or
sculpt.
There's a lot of and think about how much idolatry there is with movies even, and things like this, and the celebrities and them, and this is just visual idolatry. I mean, so I think art needs to be taken very seriously by Christians, and very critically, but also in creating it, they need to consider, how is it going to be consumed? How are people going to think about what I'm creating? There's modesty issues. There's a lot to consider.
Well, and a lot of those things that Christians consider, they only look at the arts when they're ready to knock down the idols. But when Israel brings down the high places, that's not enough. That needs to be replaced with the worship of the one true God.
Yep.
So if you go into the art world and you just start knocking stuff over, stuff that should be knocked over, burning stuff that should be burned. Let's chop up the idols. These idols will be no more. Now, what's gonna stand in its place? The one true God. That's why Christians should be making movies, and Christians should be writing sonnets and composing great pieces of music, and Christians ought to value that and reward, including monetarily, but reward with reward with just the honor that is due someone who is making all this beautiful stuff.
Yeah, I think Kimberly said, she brought up how the camera has changed the visual arts, and in some ways, I don't know, for musicians, recording devices and recording materials have changed that. I guess maybe an equivalent would be the TV for poetry. I don't know. Maybe recordings as well.
Yeah.
Other types of film media that may press it less upon people to create art and to consider art and just receive and just stand prostrate in such a way. Prostrate's not the appropriate word, but just almost blind and wide open, just to whoever wants to come in and just receive it all. And that's part of the difficulty is we don't do it anymore, so we don't know how to think about it.
Right. So not knowing how to think about it and not doing it anymore, I think raises an important question, which is, how, if every Christian has a responsibility toward beauty, and then kind of subsidiarily we've been arguing toward art, how does that affect my life every day? I make some beautiful loaves of bread, right? I make beautiful lattes in my job as a barista. Am I an artist? Is that art? Are you asking something else of me? Are you asking me simply to be attuned to how beauty shows itself in the world? And that's not what we're asking. And now I leave it in your hands.
What are we asking?
Yeah.
Why charge people to care about beauty and be artists themselves? And
I'm particularly interested in hearing what this housewife has to say. I mean, she's my housewife. I probably already know.
So, okay.
So if you can make a beautiful loaf of bread, is that what we're talking about? Is that enough?
No.
Go on.
So I would say that makes you a great baker. But it doesn't make you a skilled artist. It depends on... Dang. So the definition of art, the definitions of visual art has to do with things like the visual elements. So you have to have enough skill in line, shape, color, texture, these things. And you have to know how to manipulate them to create something. But there is a lot of question about the practicality of it and what its purpose is, right? So, I mean... Because if you look at the Old Testament, it was like so much was about adorning the temple and how they created things for the temple and these sort of things. So it is sort of like, what are you creating it for? But a lot of things it is a struggle right now. are you creating it for a beautiful home so people can have beautiful pictures on their wall at home? Yeah. Well, yes, but you could also put beautiful abstract paintings on the wall and it would look good in your home. But that doesn't mean...
As an interior decorator from a design perspective.
It matches the sofa. It has, like, there's nothing wrong with that. So, you know, there's definitely these lines of, is it craft? Is it art? Is it, you know, where does it take...
And a lot of these people in the Old Testament were craftsmen.
Right. So even things like the camera changed art so people didn't need representations of things. So they started abstracting things. Yeah. And that went actually in a terrible direction where it ended with things like the abstract expressionists who half of them killed themselves. That's the fruit it bore because they literally thought it brought them to another spiritual plane to lose all representation and it just this beautiful abstract piece. And then they've lost all hope because they realized it wasn't that wonderful a spiritual plane to worship, paint, and a canvas.
I wish I were back in my illusion.
So, you know, it's really sad, actually. It blows my mind. I can't believe how many of them committed suicide.
Right.
So anyway, you go back to thinking, well, so is abstract art art? Things like Joseph Albers painted squares of color, multiple colors of squares on a canvas. And he was playing with color to figure out how color worked and interacted with each other. That's a fascinating thing for an art book. Does it belong on a gallery wall? I don't think so. I think it's a waste of time for most people. It's art for art's sake. And then it loses all value for the world. So how does that
connect to the housewife?
So I would think a housewife is good at baking bread and feeding her family, and that is glorious. But that doesn't make her an artist. I would say an artist needs to be able to communicate with more than just her household. She needs to have enough skill that she's actually creating something that many people would be interested in having.
So then do we want to say that all Christians should be artists, or do we simply want to say that all Christians should have aesthetic training? They should have their eyes open. And because one of the things that has been a common theme in all of our episodes, Sean, has been, you know, to use a hipster word associated with putting your cell phone down, mindfulness, right? Just being turned on and aware that everything has a telos, everything has an end. And you guys on the audio side of things should really see the smile that lit up Sean's face when I said being turned on. Stop. I'm going to call him out of that.
Well, as you call me that, you pose a good question. I want to disagree with Kimberly because I get what she's saying about the visual arts, but I think the Christian mother is being an artist and doing something beautiful.
She's making something beautiful.
She should be a creator. Everyone should be imitating God's creating by creating. Did I say that right? Yeah, so like everyone should be a creator. That doesn't make them an artist. And maybe that sounds elitist.
Well, that may depend on how we define
things.
Right. I mean, how are you defining artists? They're amazing bakers, they're amazing. I mean, but
which baking is an art, and why
so that actually gets into the discussion of techne and art, right? And so, you know, when we suddenly start talking about technique, and actually maybe we could set Kimberly up at some point to start ranting about technique because she's awesome about that.
I'm afraid.
But you know, there is. So I agree with what Kimberly said, but I think we often acknowledge what we're doing here is we're defining things differently.
Yes.
Because as Kimberly said, all people should be creators. We should all be making beautiful things. Raising your family and baking bread is beautiful. There are ugly ways to do it, but when you do it right, it is beautiful. Okay, so does that make that person an artist or not? We can leave that unsaid. But what I think Kimberly's point about communicating beyond the household as being integral to being an artist may be something there. And of course, your kids, you know, they praise you in the gates. You have moved that expression of beauty and all that work you put into that beauty outside your own household.
What I'd like to see is a housewife who looks at the beautiful bread she made and sees the light hitting it from the window and thinking, oh, that's beautiful. If we use this color yellow and we put this, it would make a beautiful painting.
What if she wrote a sonnet about it or wrote a song about it?
But they understand something. They have the understanding of what the skills it would take to create something like in art.
And you're saying that maybe
I'm speaking of visual arts particularly because that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So it is confusing when you use the word art because it's like, well, in what sense?
Well, we have to recognize the primary function of art. Joffre was posing this question is to capture something, to capture a moment or some sort of metaphysical reality. And the reason we do that is because it's glorious. When we capture something that's wonderful, and the wonderful spectrum is wide, we delight ourselves in God. We have insight into who we are as creatures, into who God is as the eternal Father. And that's the wonder of it all, is we're growing into the greater likeness of Christ. And so when we have, art as technique, so it takes an artist's skill, there's an art to making bread. There's an art to having a conversation with your angry wife. There's an art to there's an art to getting.
Look at you.
Yeah, he didn't say angry husband and look at you, which I come out on the good side of that. Thanks, Shawnee. I got your back.
I've been a little too fierce.
Yeah.
There's an art to getting the kids out of the door on time and cutting their hair and no stains or pairing up their rips. But we're talking about those arts that that evoke more than invoke. And so you have something like music and song where it's arranging these sound elements within specific parameters, like here's where it starts, here's where it ends, or even with a visual piece of art, here are the boundaries of where the art is. And then with a poem, here's the first word and here's the last word. And then that's it. This little cosmos, this little moment is over. It gives you a snapshot, a vignette, and that's it. But then we go even more meta than that and realize we're living in a piece of art because story is art. We're in God's story. And, he's casting all of these colors and all of these songs around us.
And I think that, it may be interesting to talk in another episode about, something you're bringing out, which is that, maybe that what makes something a work of art is its uniqueness. This work of art that we all live in is one of a kind. A loaf of bread is not.
Ooh.
Right? There are a lot of things we do every day that we could say we do artistically, or we could say there's an art to doing this thing. But, that poem that you're describing is a thing unto itself.
Yep.
And those will never happen again.
Well, and just more definition of skills. So, if a lot of housewives make good bread, but some bakers that make amazing bread, like it's just like, why is this so much better? They hit art in bread,
That's right. That's
so
right.
I think this art has tried to lose all definition of skills and tossed it aside, at least visual arts. So I think the redefinition of skills and somebody who actually can make judgments according to skill-based understanding.
Well, we're probably approaching the end of the show, but I'd like to ask our guest.
That's you.
He says it every
That's
time.
my wife.
He is kind of weird about it.
I know.
Well, I'd like to ask what you would say practically. So we kind of danced around this earlier.
Okay.
If Christians...
Dance is art. Okay.
It is. If Christians want to be artists and better artists and artistically aware, what would you tell them? What would you ask them? And when I say art, I don't mean visual art.
Okay.
I mean all art.
Well,
and we haven't even defined fine art. I know. I just want to move it away from painting because I know that painting is the thing for you. So what would you tell all our brothers and sisters? What would you urge them to do to improve that?
Find a teacher, like Sean was saying, and I really think we need more teachers of arts. Because even so many of the art schools don't even have skills-based teaching anymore. So find someone who can teach you whatever skills and whatever art you want to study, or books at this point are a useful thing. But also just the more you see Oh, like, okay, so I'm going back to visual arts, but
Oh no!
the more you listen to, like, the more you
There you
listen
go,
to
now you can
music, the more you listen to poetry, the more you start recognizing what's good and what's not so good, or even just what you like.
Right.
And why do you
And then
like it?
why do you like it? Yes.
Right. So I think one of the things I learned in art school that was very beneficial is just critical thinking, like just thinking about things and really considering everything. And even in terms of, I don't like this, why? I do like this, why?
Right.
And then questioning and comparing is a very big deal.
And that's the answer I would give as well. I at least am not urging our listeners to all learn how to make watercolors or all learn how to write songs.
Why not?
But instead, what I would love to see is of a church culture that honors art and artists because they honor beauty, and they honor it because they understand it. They can interact with beauty truly. And so that means listening to music on purpose,
Yes.
not
There you
just
go.
having it
That's
on,
good.
right? Reading stuff on purpose, and not just your self-help book or a history book of, not just Band of Brothers. Those things can have their own beauty. Well, I don't know if a self-help book can, would be an example.
But there is a need for censorship, which is a problem. Like, I can't even always encourage my students to go to art museums because you can walk into an art museum and see terrible
See, I was
things.
thinking of adults. You're a mom and a teacher,
Even
so
adults.
you're thinking of kids.
Even adults, though. I mean, when we first got married, I subscribed to an art magazine because my teacher was like, you should be subscribed to Painter magazine. It was like bringing porn into the home. Like, I was so ashamed that I had even subscribed. We had to cancel the subscription right away. So, I mean, I think that there definitely is a need for guidance from people who have, unfortunately, maybe been in the trenches, we could say.
Mm-hmm.
Like somebody who's been through...
Which both of you guys have been. I think that's an interesting thing about this conversation. You both have backgrounds as, artists or receiving artistic training in secular institutions, which is full of hostility. I'd actually like to do a separate episode about that, about being in artistic trenches. We could drag my wife
Not
back.
fun.
Yeah, and
Sounds like, I'll think about that.
and to bring it to a close, to get trained in the arts, whether we're talking about the fine arts as we know them historically, and as we recognize how broad art can be in referring to technique and the delivery of truth, goodness, and beauty, is we need to be trained in the craft and we need to be trained in the thought. And that's sort of the disconnect, as we live in a world that is becoming increasingly popular to believe that we come from nothing, we go to nothing, and we are nobodies. And so to say that there is objective technique that is more skillful than another, you can't do that in the worldview. To say that this is more of a thoughtful idea or a more virtuous or moral principle or something that's more cohesive, you can't say that because that doesn't make sense in that worldview. And so as we are Christian teachers and as Christians who want to become better artists, whether it's something narrow like music, poetry, or the visuals, we need to make sure we're learning the craft.
Visuals. I like that.
The visuals. And we need to be learning the thought. We need to know what it takes to be a Christian and musician at the same time. Joffre, you're going to be really proud because I thought of a stellar sign-off line.
All right.
Okay.
Are you going to prep me for it, or are you just going to...
I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
And then you're going to be like, whoa, that was awesome. We're going to say it every time. Oh, but I don't know the prep to the sign-off line. Okay, here's the sign-off line.
Look how nervous he is.
I got to do this great.
You got everybody who's listening and watching, make sure you smile at Sean to encourage him in this moment.
Guys, I'm nervous. This is my first time.
Deliver it with power. Let's hear it.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This week, let your name say it all. You kind of get it because...
We both looked quizzically at each other.
Okay, this is awesome. It's going to be an awesome line. We're going to use it because I can see the beauty in it. Here's what it is.
Plow and potato, your source for Holy Spirit starch.
That's funny. We should say that too. Okay.
We should not say that.
The reason this is great is because our name is awesome. Plow and potato, like, we nailed it.
The visual artist does. Yeah, no one wants to draw a plow and
there's
potato.
the
I
thing.
know it's a terrible
Well, get this. Visually-
Now the words are.
Let me speak. Visually and verbally, you can't be creative with it because it's just too lame. Because we tried to do, put your hand on the plow and look for the potato. if you try to paint a potato in a plow.
Yeah, exactly.
However, the beauty is in the name, plow and potato, and it says it all.
That's so meta, dude. Too meta?
No, not too meta. But I explained it now, so it's good. So now
Oh,
we're gonna
okay.
say, I'm gonna say something like, all right, thank you, guest. Thank you, Joffre. Thank you, watchers. Thank you, listeners. This
Good night,
week,
Moon.
let your name say it all. Did I say good night?
No. I was like, that's the list I'm most familiar with.
That's right. Okay, but that's the thing. So our name says it all, and your name, your legacy, needs to say it all this week. Plow and potato. You get it? You like it? It's
Kind of.
awesome.
I feel like it's a first step. Here's my idea.
Holy Spirit starts.
We know. I had fun with that though. Your source for Holy Spirit starch.
That's cool.
My idea is this. After everyone's listened to this episode, let's urge them to go into our Discord
Ooh, get up in
and
that Discord.
suggest some outro lines, some good little closing lines.
Yeah, but if nothing better comes up in this, I'm
Then
not
we-
gonna
then we
He
say
make
it.
does
fun of
not
them.
want to let go of his.
Everyone's gonna be raving over this. Gonna be like, "Dang, that's awesome."
So go into the Discord from
Hey,
rate,
you
rate
stop
from 1
pointing
to
at the camera.
5.
I'm signing this thing off. Thank you, everybody. Stop pointing. Put some fingers down. I'm gonna get Kimberly to censor
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for listening and tuning in. Let your name say it all this week.
I'm sorry you had to see Sean lose his grip on himself.